Yeah, right.
Whoa, this ain't going.
Be down the bottom. And but I appreciate everybody on the chat tonight for your comments.
Hey,
Well, howdy.
how you doing today?
I'm tired.
I hear that. I had an easy day. I mean, work-wise, I guess you'd say I didn't do nothing all day long, but that made it a long day just sitting there in that rig.
Oh yeah, definitely. That can happen, I guess, right?
Yeah, but hey, the pay stays the same, so I'm not going to complain too much. I told them the only thing that could make it better, if they don't have nothing for me to do all day and I'm sitting there and getting paid, they might as well just send me home and let me get paid. They don't want to go
That
through
would
that, though.
seem that would seem like it'd be better suited, right?
Yeah, they wouldn't have to worry about an extra person on the job, anything happening.
Hey, you know what? It sounds like to me you've been working up something. You just need to sell it to them.
Yeah, they don't go for that. I wish.
Yeah. I guess they figure if they're paying you, you better be sitting there, staring at them, I guess. Huh?
Just in case.
That makes sense.
So how's everything going up there in y'all's yards?
So, I haven't this week, let's see, today is Thursday. I have not been, well, I take that back. I was into RBs a little bit here. It seems like that I think, and probably it seems like everybody else is kind of experiencing the same thing with what I'm following along, just downright hot. Now, I think you all had a little bit of rain. For us, it was like earlier in the year, and for the most part, up until maybe the last 2 weeks, I guess, it's like the faucet was just wide open. And then now it's just turning it off. Pretty much the faucet's kind of being turned off, and it just kind of got warm for us, up into the low 90s to not quite mid 90s yet, but that's still pretty warm for us. But I guess we had some really good weather for the most part this year, as far as it not being too hot. And then it's just now starting to catch up with us a little bit, I guess. But, it's St. Louis for us, so that can flip the switch a little bit too.
Well, like our weather down here, I believe they said May, we hit a record high down here for May time. I mean, we had a couple days, 110, 111 heat index.
Wow.
And
I remember you talking about that a little bit, what your temperatures were. And I'm like, man, let's keep that down there. We're not interested.
And I mean, the bad thing is July and August is usually our hottest time. So
Yeah.
I'm going to dread when that comes. But I would have to say we're already going into a dearth, because it seemed to get a little hotter earlier this year. But then some of the storms that come through, they were pretty rough. So it blew all of our tallow tassels off. And
it
they
did?
got seed balls on them now. So all the tallow's finished.
So did you see?
We got a little bit of white clover on the ground, but it's starting to dry up too, even with rain.
That's kind of what we're seeing with our white clover too. I'm kind of, I'll kind of keep an eye on a little bit here and there. And I really haven't seen bees work it a lot, because I felt like for us anyway, it was just a little bit too cool in the evenings where it may not have started to produce any nectar. And then by the time that it may have started, I seen some bees on it a little bit, but not much. I felt like it was probably not producing any nectar, probably because it was just drying up a little bit. It's not a really deep rooted plant like a tree, so
Mhm.
it can bounce back and forth very quickly. I mean, it's possible that it was producing a little bit of nectar and then it would shut off again. Much like most plants, I guess they can kind of do that. Especially the shallow rooted stuff can kind of turn off and on pretty easy. And,
About the only time I would see it on the clover here is early in the morning. I'd say probably before 10 or 11 o'clock they were on it, but it wasn't real heavy. They were just hitting it
Yeah.
here and there, and it wasn't a whole lot of them out.
Now, what are your temperatures when you wake up in the morning and the sun starts hitting out? I don't know, let's just say anywhere between 6 and 8 o'clock. What are your temperatures, generally speaking, or what have they been for the last weekish?
We had a couple nights, I can't remember if it was last week or this past weekend. Our lows at night was like 82.
Okay, so pretty warm.
So pretty warm starting off first thing in the morning. And morning time, we was 90-95% humidity.
Yeah.
So
So,
it's been
pretty
really warm down here and muggy because of the rains we've been getting.
See, now that would be typically where we would be at for highs. If coming out of the early into the early morning, we might see low 80s, and then it would jump up into the high 90s. And sometimes, if we're unlucky, it'll touch 100 degrees. Usually doesn't last much, but you know what? It can from year to year. It's just I think weather in St. Louis is a little bit bipolar. It kind of bounces around a little bit.
What time zone y'all in up there? Y'all Eastern or Central?
Central.
Central. Okay,
Yeah,
I didn't know if you was the same as me or not. Because whenever I sent you the text earlier about 7:30, I'm thinking to myself after I sent it, hold on, are they 8:30 or 7:30?
Oh no, you and I are the same. It's just Ricky and those guys on the other side of the mountains there. They jump into a little bit earlier than us.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's 7:40 now, and we still at 87, heat index 96 here.
Melissa, what are we over there? What does it say?
85.
We're at 85.
Doesn't say the heat index.
Yeah, my little thing doesn't give a heat index, but what's the humidity say?
54.
What?
54.
That's it?
Mm-hmm.
Only says 54%.
I'm showing
That's probably
62.
inside.
No, inside's 48.
Really?
I'm showing like 62% of humidity here right now, but we didn't have no rain today. It was finally a dry day.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard you talking, I don't know, I think in your chat the other evening that you had been having a lot of rain up there, or down there rather.
Yeah. I mean, we've been getting rain every couple days. It's not really that it's a whole lot of rain coming through, but the rain, when it does come through, it's been getting pretty rough. So, I mean,
Yeah.
we've been 30, 40 mile an hour winds and had a little bit of hail come down. So, I mean, it knocked all the blooms, everything off that we had.
So on the tallow tree, which I'm not familiar with whatsoever, because we're a little more north, obviously, and I guess that's a pretty southern plant. Is that bloom pretty tender?
I would say it is. It's pretty fragile little flowers. Let's see.
I only ask because it sounds like your tallow would be similar to what we would have with our black locust. If you get too stiff of a wind, I would even say if you get too much wind and a really hard rain or a light hail, you'll knock the blooms off of this tree.
Yeah.
So it can be the same thing. It can be pretty tender. Or if you have a night that just gets a little bit too chilly for us, yeah, it just decimates it.
Yeah, that's our tallow right there. So, I mean, these open up and they're kind of like a yellowish green little flower. Some of them are kind of a off-white, but
Yeah.
it don't take much to knock them off. I mean, I'm not going to say you could just touch it with your finger and they fall off, but if you get a heavy wind and some rain at the same time, it's going to knock them down.
Yeah.
If we get just a standard rain, I mean, a nice little drizzle, if you get too much, it will still wash the nectar out of it. And then it may take a couple days after that rain for it to start producing nectar again.
Okay. Now, while we're on the topic of nectar producing plants, your privet, which I know you guys were just a little bit in front of us, that seems to be a little bit hardier of a bloom. Do you guys generally see a lot of flow off of that where you were at, or just kind of just to keep it moving along?
I've had a couple years that, I mean, I got a couple buckets of just, I mean, really, really light colored, clear privet honey. And I mean, Renee loves it because it's a lot sweeter. But I'm not real big on it myself. I don't like the real sweet stuff. But I would say it's a fairly delicate flower down here. Now, you got the Chinese privet and you got the Japanese privet. I find, from what I'm hearing, the Japanese privet, it's a little bit, I guess, more hardy when it comes to weather as far as knocking the blooms off. But the Chinese privet, it don't take much. You just barely shake a limb and the petals start falling off.
Okay, so when I had sent you a picture of what I had, I thought that you said, and when I backed it up against one of the plant apps, I thought it said we had a Japanese privet, which maybe possibly because we're a little bit further north, maybe it's a little bit more, maybe the Chinese privet wouldn't do as well here. I don't know. And it's possible we could have that here too, but I'm pretty sure based upon what the plant app told me, and I think you had kind of confirmed it too, that when I sent the picture, and this is a month ago, right?
Yeah.
But we did have, I think it was a Japanese privet.
Yeah.
And there's areas here.
Yeah, that, I mean, at least that's what it pulled up when you sent it to me.
Yeah. And I think that's what mine gives a percentage on my app. When I send a picture to it, it'll say it's a such and such percentage of this, or it gives lower percentages of another species of that plant. And I'm pretty sure it gave the highest percentage of the Japanese privet. So
now,
I don't know if
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Our tallow, as far as that goes, usually you'll get the little blossoms bloom out on it. Some of them will fall off, and then you'll see like a second round come on them. And that's what we were seeing again this year. But when that second round come, before they really even dropped, that's when the storm just decimated them, took all of them out.
Huh,
so,
interesting.
Because usually we go anywhere from the middle to the end of June before the tallow is finished. And we were really kind of early June this time whenever it got knocked out.
So are you talking about when you said a little second bloom, is that on the same plant, or is that like some of your younger grow tallow might bloom a little earlier than the older grow?
I've noticed it on the same plant. You'll have some like a second round come out. Now it might not be every branch or every tip or whatever, but it'll be on the same tree that you'll kind of get two blooms.
I'm only asking because so for us, black locust is a very, again, like I talked about, a real tender bloom. The beauty about it is, I mean, if you do like a really light and floral tasting nectar or honey, I guess, it does offer that. It's not very dark, and it can push out a lot of nectar very quickly. And the beauty also is that if you get a light rain and the bees are head back out and work, they can still work this plant because the blooms kind of come out and they kind of hang down. So they don't get washed out as easily. Now, if you have a hard rain or a lot of wind, I think it does disturb and knock those blooms off. But I've noticed bees working it pretty quickly thereafter. This year, because right about the time they were getting ready to open up, which was early, by the way, and I think by and large, probably a safe statement is it seems like everybody's plants were kind of blooming out of cycle a little bit, and they were all blooming a little bit earlier than normal, just because there are weather patterns across the U.S. But about that time, it started to bloom. We had one or two evenings that really started to dip down in that 35 or 36 or so. And I noticed that some of the larger grow trees that don't have as much cover, those didn't even bloom at all. Now, some of the younger grow ones that are kind of tucked in, say like next to a wood line or a highway easement or something, I noticed those were actually blooming. And then when you get closer to St. Louis, which we're about 35 to 40 miles west or slightly southwest of St. Louis, you got away from that heat island of all the concrete. I noticed that they actually had a pretty good bloom out there at that point in time. And a lot of people out that direction or closer to the St. Louis city actually did get black locust, whereas we further out, right at the edge of the kind of the county, where you start to see a lot of farm fields, there just wasn't much of it. So, again, it just goes to show you some of these plants, how tender they are as far as when they're releasing nectar, when they're not releasing nectar. And, for us to kind of try to document some of that stuff from year to year so we can kind of help gauge what it is that we're going to do with our honeybee colonies, or how we're going to set them up to produce, or to get them in that right stage to be able to catch that nectar when it flows. But seems like for me anyway, and I've only been in 7 years, so I don't consider myself to be a veteran by any stretch of the imagination, but I have been paying attention to a lot of blooms and what bees work a lot over the last 7 years that we've been beekeeping, because I think that can really help set you up for success, or maybe even help you plan ahead of how you're going to do something with your honeybees, knowing exactly what's going to bloom in your area, about the timing that it does, and when you need to put boxes on, when you need to stall, maybe even, after you get past that, maybe when to pull a couple boxes back and reduce them down a little bit. So
Yeah.
all those fun things that have to keep us on our toes,
I didn't do it this year, but let's see, 22 and 23, I was somewhat keeping track of what was blooming and when, and then just kind of color coding red for dirt stuff.
I love all your charts, Lee.
I know, man. I mean, I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to lie right now. I mean, sometimes you just kind of make me feel like crap here because, you have this thing all organized, and I feel like I'm just hanging on by the thread of my pants, honestly, here.
I didn't even do it. I didn't even really look when stuff was blooming too much this year. I took a few pictures and posted, said, hey, this is about to bloom here. This is blooming, and that was it. But I didn't actually document it in all my spreadsheets. But
so you're making me feel a little better, is what you're saying. As a way to put it,
yeah,
right.
I need to keep up with that, because I did notice between like the 2 years that I was doing this, that you would see a week and a half difference, which, I mean, every year is not going to be exactly on the date that it happened the year before.
Yeah.
But it would give you a gauge, at least, hey, the beginning of this month, this is usually when something happens, or no, that's going to happen at the end of this month.
Yeah. Well, that can kind of help you plan ahead just a little bit.
That way I need to keep track of it more often, like I was doing. That way, like you were saying, what's about to bloom, when to start putting boxes on, if you're going to have to do any feeding or anything like that.
Yeah.
Spring was so weird this year, though, because it seemed like some things like bloomed out of order, almost. Like the tulip poplar bloomed before the black locust, and things were just odd this spring.
Yeah, that doesn't usually happen. Again, I'm only into it 7 years, and I can't say that I've been paying attention to it for 7 years. But what I will say is I don't know of a time that the black locust didn't bloom before the poplar tulip tree did. So it was kind of odd, because I'm looking at my back. I literally have one in my backyard. It's about 30 feet tall. So I can see exactly when it starts blooming and when it ends. Now it did bloom for a couple weeks. So it
seemed like it bloomed longer this year than
maybe a little bit too. Maybe a little bit. I think we can usually see a couple weeks out of it. And truthfully, you can actually see, I kind of pruned mine up a little bit higher this year, because I don't like it hanging too low to the ground. But when I had seen some of the branches hanging, I pulled them down and looked at it. You can actually touch the bottom of that open bloom down there and actually feel wet nectar at the bottom. So it's a fair amount.
That's nice.
Yeah. I'm guessing you probably don't have that down there, do you?
I hadn't seen none myself. Now, as far as my chart, what I was keeping up with, that's just like my general area, either my yard or just kind of in the neighborhood as I'm driving out. Is when I notice, really pay attention to what plants are growing here. Now, we got some, I'd say 10 miles down the road that I hadn't seen in my area. And I've been telling myself I need to stop, to talk to the people, say, hey, you mind if I go out there and take a picture of this tree or whatever, so I know what it is? And I just hadn't stopped.
Yeah. Well, I've gotten really good at identifying a lot of these nectar producing plants and trees in my area. Now what I need to do is, and I told myself how I was going to do it this spring, and every time I look at, I just haven't done it, is I was going to start keeping a log like you had done there. Maybe not quite that fancy on a graph, but I was going to log it in my phone when I started to notice the first blooms on a particular plant, you know, and then like maybe when I seen the bees actually working it. So, you know, just one of those things. You get to prioritize everything, and that was low on my priority list, I guess.
Now, I mean, as far as like my little charts and everything, I was keeping track of each yard and what honey was coming off of each hive. I could tell you how many supers one individual hive produced, and the way my buckets were labeled. Let's see. I could tell you each bucket, what yard it come out of, what hive it come off of, what date it was extracted. I mean, I kept track of all of it, but it just got to be a little bit too much getting all that extra detail. Let's see. Take that one.
Yeah, I think that, you know, sometimes your graphs inspire me. You know, when you put a graph up for, you know, what's blooming, when it bloomed, how much did this, you kind of inspire me to do that. So at some point, Lee, I am going to get my act together. I'm going to come up with a plan, and I'm just going to
He's going to say, Melissa, make this graph.
I can send you this one. Basically, it's just you fill it in. I mean, I got yard 1, yard 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 8, and then I could tell you yards 1 through 4 what each one produced. It would chart everything for you, and anytime you enter, just say for instance, this block right here is showing 15 medium supers. Now, if I come over here and just say instance, I had 6 supers on that automatically changes to 21 here. And then when you go to the chart, it's going to tell you how many supers I had total.
Yeah.
But it was a lot getting all that done. And I'm like, nah, that's a little too much.
Yeah.
But I mean, I still halfway keep track of just what I'm producing in total now. I don't go by yard or by hive anymore. Hey, if I got 10 buckets, I got 10 buckets. That's say 600 pounds.
I was kind of hoping at some point I can get to a position where I can do 2 harvests a year. I'm not talking about a fall harvest. I'm talking like an early spring, and then one, you know, around or after that July 4th time period, which at that point in time, most of the time, we've kind of started to get into a dearth here in our area. Seems like it might be happening a little bit sooner though.
Yeah.
And I just need to figure out when we're actually going to pull our supers and harvest all that.
I think part of our problem is we don't get our supers on early enough we always miss that first initial flow of that really early stuff.
Yeah, we've done that, but we've also kind of focused more on splits and growing colonies. And I guess you can look at it 2 ways. I could have started the super right away and let them fill those, and then have to come back and potentially do some feeding. Because, you know, running the double brood box, I always let them fill up that upper brood box and get a lot of stores in there before I throw a super on. So I may have to feed later on, but once I pull supers, I won't have to feed anything. I mean, there's very few of them when I probably have to feed right away because they have some good stores in their second box.
Yeah.
Some of them we went and checkerboarded some frames in, you know, just get them to draw some more comb out. And I pulled some back and held some back so I can use those to plug in later on in the year. If I need to make Melissa's going to try to do some grafting tomorrow morning so we can get that started before we leave, because we're actually heading out of town again this weekend, leaving tomorrow to go to the other side of the state over near Kansas City, small town up there called Warrensburg.
Missouri State is having a little workshop.
Yeah, the Missouri State Beekeepers Association is having Missouri Bee Day. So I see Mark Miller is in the comments there. He was waiting on Daniel with Golden Bee to make a delivery there to Truck Stop. He's actually going to be they're here. So he's actually going to be at the Missouri Bee Day. And I don't know, Mark, chime back in. Are you gonna be there at the Missouri Bee Day on Saturday? Like I said, Melissa and I are headed up there tomorrow. Going to leave sometime in the morning, head up there and spend the night. And we have a presentation to give on Saturday, and just going to visit with everyone. And then I'm not sure if we're going to stay overnight Saturday night and come back Sunday if we're just going to leave that evening and head back. It's about a 3.5 hour drive for us. So
Now, y'all going to record your presentation and post that for us?
I
don't
think we
know.
should,
We'll see.
right? We
We'll
should.
see.
The way I'm taking it there, Melissa must be doing some of the talking on the presentation because she don't want to record.
No. So the presentation's fine, but I get nervous when I present because I'm always worried about either I'm gonna talk too fast and finish way too early, or I'm gonna drag things out and I'm not gonna get to finish it all. So like the whole time I'm like just anxious about how fast and what I need to put out there. So
Yeah. As far as that goes, just figure out how long you have to talk and then
Yeah.
put a time marker by like each little topic or area you talking
that's a good
about.
idea.
And
Yeah.
then throw your stopwatch or something up there, your phone, and you know how much longer you have and what area you need to be in.
Yeah.
Mhm. One thing I had Melissa do earlier on when I had given that one presentation is I said, hey, can you number the slides? And I know in my head, because I hadn't given that presentation before, I'm thinking to myself, I don't remember how many slides I had in it, but I'm like, if you number the slides and I know what the end number is, then I can know where I'm at. I kind of look at the slide number and kind of check back at the clock and to see where I'm at, so I don't kind of hang on one topic too long.
Yeah. Now, you were talking about a minute ago as far as like springtime, getting boxes on and everything on in time. In my area, I noticed a lot of the beekeepers, they still making splits and stuff, trying to like pull the bees back so they don't peak too fast before the nectar really hits. But I'm already putting supers on instead of doing splits. And whether it's good or bad, I mean, to each their own, but I find that I might have 2 or 3 supers completely full of nectar by the time they start putting the first or maybe the second super on.
That's
So I'm
quite
a
a
little
bit.
ahead as far as the nectar collecting, but yeah, maybe I didn't make the splits and gain as many colonies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess depends on what your goal would be, right?
I feel like sometimes that you kind of hold back on putting the supers on. She's like, I don't think they're ready. I don't think they're strong enough yet. And I'm like, put the supers on.
I just don't want to give bees too much room too fast, because, and I'll tell you why. My opinion is this, and I don't have any scientific research to back it up. And maybe there is something. I have no clue. Maybe there's nothing. Whenever I look at a colony, I feel like, again, this is me visualizing when I'm making these splits and seeing these grow from a 3 frame to a 5 to a doubled up 5 frame, and then I move them over to a double. I feel like they grow a little faster if I keep them, if I don't give them too much room too fast. Is kind of where I'm going with that. So, that's why I like the whole go from a 3 frame mating nuke. They have just enough room in there. They can keep the brood warm. They can temperature regulate easily. Then I can move them into a 5 frame. So I'm only really giving them, they can only have to build 2 more frames. And if I kind of semi checkerboard them in, if my temperatures are okay, and then let them build from there. And then I can throw my second deep 5 frame upper super, which is still a deep, on there, maybe pull 1 frame or 2 frames up and kind of checkerboard them back in. I feel like, again, because I've kind of checkerboarded those, they don't like, again, this is as long as your temperatures are, reasonable. If they're too chilly, I don't like to do that because I think it'll set them back. But then that pushes them really hard to go ahead and draw out that frame that's separating their brood up just a little bit, So I like the space constraints. I feel like they do better. Again, I may be completely off base here with this, but that's just, I feel like that's what I visually see within these colonies here.
I look at it as far as, I mean, our temperatures, yeah, we're going to get warmer down here sooner than you would in Missouri. But
yeah,
I run the singles. Well, I say I run singles. I have a single deep from a brood, but I don't run the queen excluders. I put mediums on top of that. But generally, the queen, she'll get up in the medium a little bit sometimes, but for the most part, she stays to the bottom. But if I put that super on there, and it's depending on the temperature and how many brood frames I'm seeing in there, if I see they're about to explode, instead of having to make a split off of that, I'll go ahead and add the super on. That way, all the new bees, there's space for on there. They're not feeling constrained in there and ready to swarm. And if there's any comb that may be a little messed up or whatever, maybe they can go ahead and start working on that with a little bit of trickling nectar coming in until the
Yeah.
actual flow hits.
So we end up having, I feel like whenever our flow starts to hit, it's like literally the faucet's dripping, right? And it's keeping moving along hand to mouth. They're storing a little bit. And all of a sudden, literally you just open the fire hose up and it's like, holy crap. You're in them 1 week and you go right back to them. It's like, what happened? And it's like, now you're tipping boxes and checking boxes to make sure they're not building any swarm cells. And she has some room to lay. You might pull a few frames out, checkerboard a couple of them in, and then throw a super on at that point. Or maybe if you have a super with undrawn comb, maybe you just leave, like for us, we'll leave the queen excluder out, throw it on there, let them start going to town on it. But, again, our goals have been a little bit different because I haven't been really focused on just honey production. Now, I think that we'll be able to do a little better with that here this next year, as long as we do a really good job moving from here forward and setting our bees up, making sure that they are staying healthy, making sure that they are disease free and obviously mite free or as free as we can get them, of course, so we can keep them healthy. And if we end up overwintering and have, just a minimal loss, which, will count for some, but if I can keep it, under that 20%, I think I'd be content. Like to see it better than that, but if I can keep it at that, then I think we can still make out of my own colonies. I can make my own splits for my nukes and for sale, and also be able to pull a nice honey crop. And that's kind of one thing that Melissa and I are talking about here this week, and is going from a hobbyist to a sideliner. And again, I've never really been much about labels. I still kind of consider myself
full-time hobbyists.
Yeah, I still consider myself a hobbyist, but whatever, call it what you want. We just try to, grow. And that's the thing I like the most about it, honestly, is growing bees. When it gets to be honey production and harvesting honey and dealing with all that, I don't lose interest, but it's like my peak of the year is already passed, and I realized it's going to be an uphill battle, because now at this point in time, when there's no good nectar coming in to the hives, the pollen's drying up a little bit. That's when things start to get real within the colonies. And that's whenever you start to see that real battle, unfold in front of you, because now, it's much easier for, also the mites have been able to reproduce, pretty quickly and pretty heavily too. So now you're going and you're checking mite loads and seeing where they're at, pulling your honey, checking them, treat them as needed. If you're seeing a poor brood pattern, Melissa and I already talked about, I said, I don't want to tolerate anything of a poor brood pattern. I said, we're going to replace them. So
we've done that a couple of times this year.
Yeah. And I feel like that's kind of what helped us a little bit. If I had to go back in my year this year and critique it, I feel like I did very poorly when it comes to swarms, because we had, I don't even know, I'm going to say 8-10 swarms. And I think most of them were from our own colonies, which kind of disappoints me a little bit.
But I think that had to do with just our weird weather that we had, because it was so warm, so quick, and it was just really odd.
Yeah.
And they were just they just came out of winter really strong.
Well, there was that time period where we were talking about how we have a trickle of nectar, and all of a sudden it's like the faucet gets opened up and you go back to them a week to 10, maybe even 14 days later, however your timeline worked out. And they were already, trying to backfill that nest, and she's already starting to build swarm cells. So you're like, holy cow.
Well, and some of the ones that swarmed were ones that we had taken splits out of and split a couple times. So it was crazy.
Most of the good colonies we had, we pulled at least one split. Some of them had a second split off of them. So, it's one of those live and learn things. I feel like this helps us to bet it. If we pay attention to what we feel like we've done wrong, correct it, depending on what all of our goals are. All of our goals are going to be different amongst beekeepers. Figure out where we've gone wrong, and then adjust from the next year. And that's how the lessons that always hit hard are the ones I always learn off of. And I've heard many people say that before too, but that literally describes me to a T. Whenever something hits hard, that's when I'm like, okay, I have to make a change here. What did I do wrong? How can I do it better? And then it stands out in my head come the next year because I don't want to see that same mistake or what I would consider a failure on my behalf. So trying to correct those things.
Well, like you say, as far as like the nectar just barely trickling in and then it just is wide open. When our tallow just starts getting, I can throw a box on there, say a week early, and they're just barely wanting to even draw any comb out. Say they just waxed foundation. They might have a little section, I mean, size of a silver dollar, whatever. They just draw in that little bit in. They just taking their time, not wanting to draw.
Mhm.
And then I can go out there, say maybe the following weekend, and the nectar done hit. They've done drawn the entire box out and got 8 or 9 of the frames full. It's like, hold on, last weekend they didn't even have nothing drawn out. Now I got to hurry and throw another box on before, like you say, they start backfilling the brood nest.
Yeah. It's like wax glands have been officially stimulated and they are just pumping it out.
But that's one reason I find that I put my supers on a little bit earlier than anybody else. That way I don't have to worry about that as far as them wanting to swarm. They have plenty of room to lay in. If they have some starting to hatch out and I hadn't thrown that super on yet and they start getting a little trickle of nectar, like you say, they're going to start backfilling. Well, then you got a problem. They're going to want to swarm.
Yeah.
So I always throw that box on, at least give them something that they can have room. They're not feeling crowded, whether they're doing work on it or not. At least there's room in there for them, for me.
Well, and maybe that's what Melissa and I will have to do. And I know even Melissa said something about it. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Adding a box. I'm like, I don't know. But, again, it's just one of those things.
Doesn't listen unless somebody else suggests it first.
Hey, Tom, put a box on early next year.
Hey, that's a great idea. Hold on, I'm putting it into my mental note capacity spot up here. Okay, it's burnt in.
We said it was okay.
Now, like I said,
So-
I mean, that's just the way I do it. And I think y'all go more to bee production than honey, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
you're still looking to where maybe you do want that box a little more crowded to where they're going to start wanting to swarm, or you can make a split and pull some cells out of it if they've started drawing
Mhm.
cells. Or if they're crowded, you can at least make a split off of it, and then y'all generally get queens with y'all's bee association.
Mhm.
So y'all might make splits that way. So y'all looking more the bee production versus honey. So that might be why you ain't throwing on super zone that early. You're actually wanting to make splits.
Yeah. Well, and here's for example. So last week, there's a gentleman that's in my area. He wanted to make 20 splits, some 2-frame splits. And he asked me if I would sell him some brood. And I said, sure would. So, and I'm trying to think, there wasn't any of them. Well, I take that back. There was a couple of them that I pulled brood out of.
It was brood and bees. It wasn't just brood.
Brood and bees that had coverage on them that did have 1 or 2 supers on it, which most of those weren't going to, because our crop's kind of drying up a little bit, weren't going to produce a whole lot. So I really didn't care. So I was content to do that. So we sold off 20 brood frames to a guy so he could make his own split. So honestly, I would, for me, I would take that over having to go out and harvest honey. Now, not that I don't want any, because I do, but I just don't care that I don't have 4,000 or 5,000 pounds, sitting here ready to go. But, things may change a little bit over time too, because the more that we start to put stuff in stores, or she does, vendor fairs and stuff, and we'll need more at that point in time, I may shift my focus a little bit more. But we've also grown quite a bit this year too. So, and I'm getting to a point where I think I want to start to really cap that. I'm not looking to go where I'm 200 or 300 hives. It just, it's a lot to do.
Yeah.
He said at 100. Now we're at 170. So we'll see what happens with that.
Well, I mean, if you want to kind of work both sides, you can take, instead of trying to split one yard up and make all your splits in this yard and trying to produce honey, you might be able to take 1 yard and do your bee production in that and have a separate yard just for honey production.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably a better idea, and that's probably how we should manage it. And
we talked about doing that before, and we kind of do that with certain yards. Like I know the grafting and the pollen trapping and things like that. We do all that at home because that stuff takes more attention and whatnot. The other 2 yards, not intentionally, Jamie. Then we have 2 yards that are close together that we kind of want those to be our mating yards. So after we graft, we'll take the mating nukes out there. And then the other 2 would be honey production. 3 yards would be more honey production.
Yeah.
So we kind of do that, but not like set in stone.
Mm-hmm.
See,
Yeah,
what I
like
was,
the
as far as honey
Okay.
production this year, I was hoping to be right around 2,000 pounds. But with the tallow kind of dropping off early, I'm probably going to end up, I'm figuring 13 to 1,500 pounds, somewhere around there.
Now, will that be enough for you to cover what your consumption would be as well as your customers that you have?
To be honest, I'm not 100% sure because I've been doing the one little farmer's market here by the house they buy from me, but they've started a second market in Baton Rouge.
I see.
And so if trying to figure that out, and then I'm selling more at work and all now too, because it hadn't been too long ago. I bought a case of 325 1-pound bottles. I'm about to have to order another case now.
Yeah.
So it's, and I've only pulled 700 pounds so far.
Well, that can give you when you're buying those bottles in bulk, or what you think you might use for the year based upon your goals. Now you can save a little more money because even if you can save, a few cents, let's just say per bottle, and it doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're buying a couple cases, or I think a case is around 300 or a little over 300, something like that for the 1 pound plastic, at least from the gal we get them from, I think they're a little over 300.
Something like that.
Right.
I don't know. We need to
I
order.
don't think I pay that much. I'll have to see if I've even entered it in here yet, cause
So Carl asked if Tom's a full-time beekeeper now. So
No.
what kind of happens is Tom owns a landscaping company and I stay home. So as long as he's staffed properly, he'll get the guys going in the morning and send them out, and then me and him will go do bee stuff as needed. So it's definitely a full-time hobby, but it's luckily we're able to schedule that way.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't know what we do.
the first time I ordered bottles from Gamber, it was $342, but that was $100 and something of shipping basically overnight. But that
Okay.
was lids, 1,700 lids in 325 bottles. So basically, I only have to order lids every 5th time I order another case of bottles.
Okay.
The last time when I ordered bottles, 325 bottles plus shipping and everything, I'm looking at like 167. And that's through Gamber containers. So, I mean, I think me and Bob had figured it up before. It worked out to like 40 cents per container,
Okay.
something like that. I mean, that's with lids.
I don't know how much we pay for ours. I'd have to
Yeah, I don't
look it
remember.
up.
What I was saying earlier, it wasn't the price. Like I think when they come in, a box of them, I think was around 300 or 340. That's how many bottles were in there, not the price.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying price.
Yeah. No, because we're not paying a buck a bottle for the plastic squeezes. We do buy a little bit of the nicer no drip lid. Yeah. You have the same. That's the no drip lid, right?
No, it don't have that little rubber
Oh, it doesn't.
little
Okay.
piece in it.
Yeah. So the other lids we had, which were a little smaller, they didn't have the no drip. I didn't care for those as much. We spent a little bit more money and went with the ones that had the little rubber piece in there that was no drip. I don't know that at the end of the day it really matters, just in my head what I thought I liked a little better,
Yeah. Well, what I find with those, I mean, while you squeezing it out, if you kind of start working back the other way, when you let go, that vacuum creates and kind of sucks that last drop back in for you anyway.
You know what's nice
Yeah.
though about those no drip lids is when you do markets and you're like giving people samples, the honey, because it gets so hot and that honey just gets runnier the hotter that
Yeah.
it gets. That lid is really nice on those days
Yeah.
when you're out doing markets.
I wouldn't have
Yeah.
thought about that, but yeah, that probably would be better. It ain't gonna just pour out as easy.
Yeah.
I need
I
to
had
cut it.
some involuntary apitherapy today too, Darren.
I only got stung once. Melissa and I did a cutout today, or actually my son.
Yeah, yesterday and today.
Yeah, yesterday and today we did cutouts. They both went pretty well. Yesterday was in the between a first floor and a second floor in the floor joist. It was a pretty decent little colony. And funny thing is, I went and checked that back this evening because we isolate them. And I'm not going to tell you, put the bottom board on back.
Oh, shut up.
Anyway, Melissa made a little boo boo. I called her out on it. It was kind of funny, so I get to do that every once in a while. But
Come on, you got to tell us now.
So we
yeah,
just got all of these bottom boards from Daniel at Golden Bee, right? They're solid bottom boards, and usually we have screen bottom boards. Well, on his solid bottom boards, the one side only has a smaller opening. What is it?
I think it's 5/16 or 3/8
to the other one. So I wasn't thinking in my head, and we had been using these solid bottom boards since we got them from Daniel, and we've been putting them on the smaller side. And so Tom just handed me a bottom board, and I wasn't thinking. He handed me a screened bottom board. Well, I'm just looking at it and looking at like the size, like the small side to the large side. So I put it on the small side, not even paying attention to that it was a screened bottom board, right? And we'd been doing this removal all day. So I was just like, you're done. I'm putting the bees away so we can leave. I was hot and just ready for the day to be over. So I put the bottom, and he had to leave to go meet somebody to pick up a nuke or something. Anyway, So I put this bottom board down. I put the boxes on. I dump the bees in, get it all together, and I walk away. And my son was there with me, and I'm like, "Hey, Isaac, go look over there and see if those bees had calmed down yet." He's like, "No, they're really still flying around a lot." And it had been like 20 minutes. So I'm like, okay, whatever. Maybe it's just going to take them longer to just kind of settle down. So then Tom comes back up to the shop where we quarantine these bees to pick me up because he had picked up these nukes. Anyway, and he's like, he goes over and looks at the bees. He's like, "You put that bottom board on upside down." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "I gave you a screened bottom board." He's like, "Now they have two entrances. They're coming out the front and the back."
I didn't have the energy to correct it. I'm like, you know what? I don't even care. I'm leaving. I need to go. I had to meet that guy that he was buying 2 nukes off me.
I'm like, extra ventilation for the evening.
Yeah.
So it got corrected today. This afternoon we fixed it. But
Yeah.
And then so he's going through when we're fixing this bottom board thing this evening. We're kind of going through because this was the cutout that we did yesterday to see if we got the queen because we didn't actually see the queen when we were doing it. And he finds the queen, and she was actually marked. So it was actually somebody's managed colony swarmed into this guy's house that we had to remove these bees from. And she was marked white, and she can't be a white queen. That would be white as years ending in 1 and 6. She would be way too old to like. There's no way she's a white.
She was
queen.
still laying a pretty decent brood pattern, but I'm gonna now that we got her buttoned up in the hive, I'm gonna watch her because I don't know where she's from, but if she's not laying something that's pretty spectacular, I'm probably gonna replace her.
But even still, there's no way she's a white queen.
I was about to say there could have been a chance that he just went in to mark one. Maybe that was
Yeah.
the only color he had or something.
Yeah.
The only swarm that I've caught from a managed colony of somebody else's was at our local farmers market. The people that actually own the property live behind it, and their daughter had a couple of beehives. Well, they swarmed out and come straight over to the market. So after the market was over, I had to get up in the back of the truck and get them out, but she wasn't marked.
Yeah, sometimes it isn't real often that when we have done cutouts before in the past that I found actually marked queens.
I don't know that we've ever found a marked queen before.
Yeah, nothing comes to mind right away, but I feel like we have, but nothing comes to mind right away. But yeah, it's just interesting. You happen to see her. I'm like, holy cow, she's marked. I'm like, that looks like she was starting to rub off, and I'm like, I swear that looks like it's white, or it was like a cream looking color almost. I'm like, this was from somebody's managed colony.
Where was that? Oh, that was in Creve Coeur.
Yeah, it was in Creve Coeur.
Well, technically, if you look at it, that must have been somebody else's unmanaged colony if they swarmed.
Yeah.
This is a true statement. Much like my unmanaged colonies that have swarmed out of my boxes, right?
And these people, so that had been there since beginning of May, I think they said. And it got into where their dryer vent goes into their house because the outside vent cover detached from the dryer vent pipe. I don't know what you call it. So there was a gap between where that cover is into the house, and they'd made their little colony there in that floor space.
That's
all
a
along.
nice warm area for them anyway.
Yeah.
Can you load a picture? Or do I have to give it to Lee?
There's pictures on our Facebook page.
Lee, I'm going to share a picture with you. You can put it up so you can kind of describe this here.
But those bees were super calm too.
They really were. You know, often when you first, because when I usually cut into them, I'm using one of those small little those little vibrating tools, and it they're creating a lot of vibration when you start to pull that piece of drywall down or plywood, whatever it is you're removing to get them in there. You know, they pop off pretty quickly, but once you vacuum them down a little bit, reduce some of those guard bees, the temperament changes pretty quickly. But I actually didn't take any stings yesterday until I finally, at the very end, I actually had my veil off and I was fixing the dryer vent on the outside of the house that had come separated. And I had to do a little bit of manipulation on her vinyl siding and pull a couple pieces back so I can fix it properly so she wouldn't have any more honeybees move in there. And one popped me right underneath the eye. But that was all I took that day, so it wasn't too bad.
Well, Jack and Danae that usually come in the comments here, you was talking about Melissa took some stings when you didn't at the time. She left a comment on Renee's picture talking about Jack laughs at her every time she takes a sting. He said, that's one less one he's got to take. So that's what I told Renee. I said, you just took that sting for me.
Well, that would be true. If she takes the sting, you don't have to. So that's true. Yeah, so that was the picture in the ceiling. So it was in the first floor up into the second.
That vent pipe, that's how it was when we found it. Tom didn't, nobody's moved anything. So
yeah, you can see at the bottom of the picture, which is insulation, which is heading out the back of the house. That's right there. Yeah. And they were just getting in because it had separated like that. And I told them, I said, somebody replaced this vent here in the back since the house was built. I said, because it didn't fit. So I had to trim the vinyl siding to get it to fit. And once I got it repositioned and back in there, then I used some foil tape and taped it up. And I'm like, you won't have a problem with this again. And I'm like, truth be told, I said it could have created a fire hazard or an issue if it got blocked up with lint. And, I said, all it was doing when you guys were using it would have been pumping a lot of hot, moist air inside there. And she said they hadn't used it a lot since it pushed out. So I said, well, you can use it now with no issue. And the bees are not going to get back in that space. So, but it was a really nice colony, really calm. And, it was pretty easy to cut out, so it was inside the air conditioning too. So it was inside the house. So it made it really easy. And we just threw down a bunch of our drop claws and plastic and cordoned off the area and pulled them out. It wasn't a big deal. So this was our first time that we had our one son, Andrew, with us. So he got to get his feet wet on this one and help me out with this. So it was kind of nice. But we got her all fixed up and everybody was happy and they were glad to have him gone. So this just goes to show you, people keeping their houses all buttoned up and all the holes and spaces all, in good shape where the honeybees can't get in, and us as beekeepers being good stewards of our colony and not letting them swarm or doing the best job that we can. Right.
Well, I mean, it, like you say, it depends on if you are full-time or part-time or what your other job is, how often you can get out there to your bees to do everything.
Yeah.
And I mean, we do the best we can sometimes, but sometimes things happen.
Yep. Yeah, they do. And you know what? They can get away from anybody because, at the end of the day, the bees are not going to halt their production because we don't have time to deal with it right now. So that just goes to show you that, hey, you better make time for the bees or they're going to schedule for you.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the saying that goes like this when it comes to equipment. It says, if you don't schedule maintenance for your equipment will schedule time for you. And that's 100% true when it comes to maintaining your equipment and such. You know, I'm pretty good about keeping all of our equipment well maintained and in good working order. And I don't, knock on wood, I really don't ever have any breakdowns out in the field. It's just too costly, you know. So trying to do your best that you possibly can with the time that you're allowed to manage them. And I would say particularly if you are in a residential area, you know, that's something that we always try to preach at our own club meetings is, hey, look, you know, being in Eastern Missouri, that's around the city of St. Louis area. I'm like, you all have an obligation to make sure that you guys manage your colonies well, because what's going to happen is if you don't, and somebody gets rubbed the wrong way because they had to pay $800 or $1,000 to have somebody come in and remove the honeybees out of their wall, and the insurance won't pay for it.
Mm-mm.
They get rubbed the wrong way and they see their neighbor has a hive, whether they came from there or not. So they're going to make enough noise at their city council meeting or whatever, and they're going to start making laws that say you can only have this many hives, or if you don't have this much property, you can't have any hives. All these sort of laws that these politicians like to make up is, you know, what's going to happen, you know. So we have to do our best to be good stewards.
There was something in one of the local suburbs a couple of years ago in Baldwin, actually, about that. I don't know whatever happened with that. Like that kind of got.
They came to a resolution, but there was limitations, though. But you know,
I dropped the link in the comments there if anybody wants to join in. Since Ricky's here, not here, I can't pin the comment, so I'll just drop it in there every now and then. Say again, Melissa.
Copy and paste it.
Yep. But yeah, it's just getting that time of year, at least down here. I mean, it's not really a whole lot of work to be able to be done in the bees because, I mean, the nectar flow is pretty much over. We're going to be pulling honey pretty soon, and it ain't much until fall, and that's if we get a goldenrod flow here. Now, yeah, after we pull honey, I mean, we'll pull honey and then we'll check for mites, whatever, do any treatments we need to do, but that's going to be about it.
Do you pull honey in the fall, Lee?
If we get enough, I will. Some years we get pretty decent goldenrod flow here. Some years we don't. Now, if I get 2 or 3 supers off of a hive, yeah, I'll pull some. But if they're only filling up maybe 1, I'll just leave that on them.
Yeah.
Rather than having to backfeed sugar water or anything.
There was so much goldenrod last year, but it was so dry that it didn't produce any nectar. I'm sure they got plenty of pollen off of it, but there was no flow from it whatsoever. But it was so disappointing because it was everywhere. There was so much of it.
I think it was the year before last. I think I seen 1 goldenrod in my backyard and like 2 or 3 in the neighbor's yard, and that was it.
Yeah.
I think that was the year before last year. We had a fairly decent flow with a goldenrod.
So I'm kind of excited. This yard that we started in Union a couple weeks ago, the people who own the property said there's a bottom field and it's full of milkweed and all kinds. And she said last year there was just bees and all kinds of pollinators just all over it. So I'm kind of hoping that that all blooms out again this year and see what happens with that. So I'm kind of excited to wait and see what that.
Brian made this comment earlier, and I thought it was something that, you know, was really spot on. Says he sets goals every year. We don't achieve them all, but that's okay. Goals give us direction for growth, focus, and reflection. And then this is spot on. I think this translates to somebody with 1 hive or somebody with 10,000. You know, if you don't have a goal, you can't know where you're going to go. Or nothing to strive for, nothing to achieve. You know, so I think that even anybody in here with just 1 colony, if your goal is to keep 1 colony, you know, what is your strategy to keep 1 colony? Are you going to do 1 colony and maybe make a split that you can use as a resource? You know, how are you going to do that? So, I mean, I really think that I try to go through life with this, and not just in beekeeping, but with everything. I try to make some kind of goals every single year and try to follow through. Again, I don't always meet them, but yeah, if you don't aim, yeah, exactly right, Paul. If you don't aim at something, you'll hit nothing. That's 100% right. I think that, that we try to go through life and try to do that with every aspect of it, just to maximize everything we can get out of it.
Now, I was going to ask you earlier, you was talking about if you got some queens that's not laying too good or whatever, you're going to replace them. Are you going to pinch those queens, or are you going to try to use those as a resource on the side?
No,
depends on what their issue is. The two that we had, we pinched them because they were laying drones. So is it because they're just being spotty brood pattern? Is it, are they drone laying, like they're done? It kind of depends on what the issue is, why we want to replace them. So those two were laying drones, and we're like, nope, we're done.
I would like to get to a point where I get really picky. I've been watching a lot of, and I've always liked the guy. I've never told Brian about this when we were out in Colorado. I'm like, he's one of my favorite speakers is Bob Benny. The guy is just a wealth of knowledge. And he will freely give any knowledge of anything that he's done, mistakes that he's made, and he gives it in this so non-judgmental way. And I like his approach. He's a really intelligent individual, and I think that he's really humble, but the man has really done very well for himself. So I really like his approach when he talks about things, and I watch a lot of his videos, and sometimes I watch the videos like 3 and 4 times. If there's something I'm interested in, I want to really get it to sink into my thick head, I'll watch it like 3 or 4 times. So I can get all that I want out of that. The one thing that I want to really strive toward, and we started to do that again here this year with replacing queens, or if they started to build cells, maybe I'll leave one in there so they can requeen themselves and kind of let that happen naturally. But, we also made a bunch of splits, but we also held some back. And I've done it 3 times already within the last couple of weeks on some smaller colonies that I started. I noticed a couple of them that weren't doing well, pinched a queen, came back in and just plugged a nuke right in within about 24 hours. And just a small one, just to be like, you know what, not tolerating it. But I would like to get to a point to where if I see something I don't like whatsoever, pinch the queen, plug a nuke in, just so I can keep those colonies without missing the beat. Earl Hoffman he kind of works with the guys at Strong Microbials. The guy is so intelligent, and he's a wealth of knowledge too. And I started talking to him a little bit. He gave a presentation at our club and started talking about once you get past that summer solstice and you start getting well into it, and they're no longer rearing as much brood, and all the bees have that royal jelly stored. What they start doing at that point in time, if they're not actually feeding it, because it constantly is being produced, if they're not feeding it, they start sharing it amongst their sisters back and forth. And then that changes the dynamic of the bees. So when they start rearing different bees, they'll start to get to where they're not that springtime bee anymore. It's like that change going through past that summer solstice, getting past into August and September, and they start rearing those bees that are going to be set up for winter. If you try to go in and requeen a colony that's been struggling past that point, often and you start to get it where it looks like it's recovering, often they can still fail over winter because they didn't have enough time to rear those winter bees. So, and it made me think a lot when he talked about it like that. And he described it much more eloquently than I just did there. I just kind of threw it out there. But when he was talking about that, I'm like, that makes sense. So if you actually build yourself some nucleus colonies and you don't have any intention of turning them into a production colony, you can now take that nuke and plug it right into where a failing queen, or if something happened where they didn't requeen for whatever reason, plug it right in, because that nucleus colony has all the right age bees to be a perfectly cohesive colony. And the way he described it was just, I'm like, it's like a light bulb went off in my head when I heard it. I'm like, that makes perfect sense. So rather than just trying to spend a lot of money at the very tail end of the season, putting a $40 or $50 queen in, sometimes you might just count your loss and do a combine with another colony and be like, you know what, there's not enough time for them to rear the right amount of brood to get those winter bees set up for them to overwinter well enough, because you might go in like, oh, they actually looked pretty good. And all of a sudden they just died. Maybe you had a little cold snap. And I think that's where people might say, well, the cold killed my bees. Well, I think that the colony wasn't set up with those winter bees at that point in time. And that's what really caused them to kind of go off the deep end. So all these tidbits of information that I get from these guys who are just this wealth of knowledge that we try to implement into our own operation. And that's one of the things that Melissa and I talked about too, is just plugging nukes in. Queen goes bad, plug a nuke in.
Well, like you say, if they ain't built up right for wintertime, and you say, some people say, oh, the cold weather killed them. The winter bees have more of I guess you'd say, fat stores in their body versus like a spring or a summertime bee. So it's not that just the cold killed them. If they would have had the actual winter bees in there, they could have handled that colder weather.
Yeah. He even talks about, and I don't remember what the percentages are, that a strong colony will rear heater bees. And there's every bee that's in the colony going into winter is not a heater bee. And he showed a graph on there of what they do is they run their heads down into the cells from each side, and they actually kind of heat the comb up. So people think they're heating the whole cluster or heating the air up inside there, and they're not. They're heating the comb up. Especially that's where you get into where, like, you ever notice on your colonies, the bees always store on the outside edges, and on the top, they store that's where they put their honey at. Well, that actually acts as an insulator. And that's something that I've kind of come to realize every time I go do a cutout inside of a wall, a floor, wherever it might be, the way that the bees set it up, just kind of on their own free will, where they put stuff within the colony, how they place things, that can help us to be, better beekeepers, and knowing that they don't put pollen at the far end of the reaches away from the brood. Wherever they're rearing brood, they're putting it either in that frame on that top edge, or they're storing it right next to it, usually one frame over on that same side. So I don't ever take pollen and move it all the way to the outside edge, because, unless the brood is reaching that outside edge, we put it right next to it. So we don't move it that far away, because you're really just slowing the colony down. But they always have those outside frames, at least the outside of the outside frames, always have honey on them. And I think that as you get to winter, they start building that in a little bit. So, they can get in there. The heads go down inside of the heater bees, go down inside the comb, and they heat that comb up around them. And that's where the kind of bees move in and out, it's kind of a rotation inside there. So it's a really cool, again, I just love listening to these guys. They're just way smarter than these guys have forgot more than I've ever learned. Right. And I'll be the first to admit that, but just listen to these guys. They're just a wealth of knowledge. They help me to be more successful.
Well, like you say, as far as the honey on the outside of the hive, on the outer walls, that helps as more of an insulator. And some people will go in and they'll say, well, I want to try to pull all of my honey. Well, I say some people, generally a new beekeeper is going to say, hey, there's a honey frame. Let me pull that. Well, they don't realize that's going to help them in the wintertime as that insulation to keep that hive at a specific temperature.
Definitely.
Well,
and it's really hurting them.
How much of an insulator that is. The cutout we did a few weeks, maybe like a month ago, I guess, in Ladue, when we originally went there to do the inspection, we could see where the bees were entering because they were coming in at the roof line. But when we went in there with the infrared camera, we couldn't find the bees anywhere in the walls. But we knew the general area where they had to be, right? Because we could see where they were coming in from the outside. They're coming in from the out. Anyway, when Tom cut into the wall, we couldn't find them. The infrared camera wouldn't even pick them up because they had like how thick was that? Like 2.5 inches?
It was pretty thick
Of honey. Was the comb against the wall. So that infrared camera was not picking up any heat signature because all of that honey was there. Yeah, that's how much that honey insulates.
That infrared camera does a pretty good job of seeing through drywall. Brick, not going to happen on brick. You know, something too thick, it's just not going to pick up. And
I was about to say,
think-
if you go out there on a cooler morning on brick or something like that, you might get, I mean, just a little hint of heat on your camera. But if you go out there after the sun's hit it, it ain't no getting it then.
That was the same thing I told a lady the other day. She wanted me to bring my thermal camera out and do an inspection. I said, I can't do it midday, man. I'm like, it needs to be late in the evening. And I'm like, at that point in time, there's too much solar heating that's already happened. I'm like, it needs to be first thing in the morning.
Yep.
And I'm talking pretty early. You know, I said, once we've gotten into where the days are up in the high 80s or 90s, you can't go in and with a thermal camera and start poking around at 10 a.m. It doesn't work the same anymore. There's too much of that heat
To me,
going on.
you'd have to get there, I mean, right after daylight, before the sun even hit whatever wall it is. And if it's on the east side wall, it's even harder. You got to get there, I mean, sometimes before daylight.
Yeah. So that honey frame, I mean, that just I knew about where they had to be, and then I'm like, man, there's no way they're in that wall. But when I pulled that ceiling out of that little dormer and I looked in there and I seen there was a bunch of bees up there, but I didn't see any comb on that cutout. I'm like, there is no way this is the nest. There was a lot of them up there, but I'm like, this is not it. And I'm like, there's no comb. And I'm like, I know that the bees have been in there for at least 3 weeks because I'd done that inspection, and it was a few weeks later until we got back to doing it. And then I seen there was a 2x6 wall and a piece of sheeting on the outside, and they were just there was a 1/4 inch space, and the bees were getting down there. I'm like, they have to be in that wall. But this was a huge house, and there was a lot of dead space and spots. So I went around the other side where the daughter's bedroom was at, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, there's no way. So I drilled a hole into her closet wall, and there was a 30-inch dead space. And I'm like, there's no bees in here. And I'm like, where the heck? And I'm like, they have got to be in that 2x6 wall. But I'm like, that should have been an insulated wall. There shouldn't have been any space there for them. But sure, I'm like, well, and I hit it with the thermal camera again, and I couldn't see it. I'm like, they have to be in there. There is no other way.
There's nowhere else they could be.
Nowhere else.
Tom had already been in the attic when we did the inspection and looked in the attic, and there were no bees in the attic.
They puzzled me. I can tell you that one threw me a little bit, but it was a good learning experience. And I went down and told the homeowner, and the guy's like, Tom, he goes, you do whatever you have to do to get them gone. And I'm like, I just want to make sure that we are clear about exactly what's going to happen here. I mean, you're talking a $2 and $3/4 million house. I'm just not going to go in there and start willy-nilly cutting holes all over the place,
Yeah.
And he's like, you do whatever you have to do. And when you're done, let me know what the bill is. I said, okay. So we cut into that wall, and boom, when I see that, pulled that drywall down, just a huge sheet. And like Melissa said, it was at least 2 inches, maybe even as much as 2.5 inches thick. And that was enough to insulate it from the thermal camera. And I couldn't believe it. I never would have guessed that in a million years. So it is important to have that insulation layer in our colonies. It makes a difference. It really does.
Leave that outside honeycomb alone.
Yeah.
Now, do
But,
y'all have a bore camera to be able to go through like a drilled hole to look in it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
we
I
have-
used that this morning to go into a century-old house, or better than that. There was these old columns that went straight up and down. There was 3 of them on each side. Beautiful house, and I hated to cut into them. And they did a really good job when they made these things. And I knew that they had to be inside this column, but I didn't know how this thing was made up until I went in there and started cutting into it. But I actually drilled a hole up top, scoped it, could see it. I drilled a hole at the very close to the bottom because this column was probably 10 feet tall. Drilled a hole in the bottom, and
because these bees there had been bees in this column for years and years and years and years.
Yeah.
Probably die out, new swarm comes in, so we didn't know how far down the comb was going into this column. So he did a hole at the bottom also.
Yeah.
I know Mr. Ed just put a video out maybe a week ago or something like that. They had to go in and
so
add
what
a
was
column.
funny about that is Jeff put that video out, right? The day before is when we went and did the inspection for this thing. I'm like, how crazy is that? That's like, which was great that he did that because we've never done a removal out of one of those columns before. So I was like, well, we'll watch and see how he does this. So maybe we can take some of what he's doing. But he removed that whole column out and we couldn't do that because there was a support beam running down the center of it.
Yeah, I just sent you a couple pictures just so people can see what it was. Again, the ornate artwork that was on the top of I don't know if you call that a finial or what that is, and they had a base on there. There was no way I was going to pull that out. This was a really old house and a big porch that was on there, even though they had 3 on each side. But we just ended up cutting into it, and it was probably the easiest method to get them out. But once I drilled the hole in the bottom, I didn't see comb. I scoped it, and I could kind of barely see it up there. So I went up where I was guesstimated again, drew another 1-inch hole, and then I could see the bottom of the comb there. So I'm like, that's my starting point right there. So if you guys look at that far right column, yep, you can see where that was after I put it back together. You can see I cut from the inside, my cut line there. Yeah, I cut about maybe 30 or 40% of that out. And there was a bunch of planks that made that up together, but they were in there. And I was a little bit worried about at the top of the column, there's a big header that moves across there. I was concerned that they had moved up in that header, but luckily they didn't. But they had a 4x4 that was inside there as the actual support. And it looks like somebody had made a couple of blocks in there, probably just to stabilize the column around that 4x4. Yeah, that was in there. It made it a little bit more challenging cutting the comb out. And we had to use a hole at the top where I put a little bit of Bigo in, which I don't use the stuff very often. And that stuff smells like vomit. It is nasty. And I actually used that today. I drilled a hole in the top, and I took a tissue and I soaked it in that stuff, and I stuck it in the hole as my son was vacuuming. And I said, are the bees running down, and are they fanning their wings? He said, yeah. And I said, back off for a minute. I said, stop vacuuming. I said, let them all congregate down further because it was really tight to get up in there. There was another 8 or 10 inches above that I had to get up in that decorative piece. But yeah, it was luckily they hadn't gotten up into that upper header that was up above that. I did drill an inspection hole up there just to double check and make sure I wasn't running them up higher, and they couldn't get in there. So luckily they were just in that comb, and some of the comb that was in there was really old, like so old it was like brittle, like a potato chip at the bottom part of it. But the colony looked really healthy. I'm sure it's been occupied multiple times. And at this point in time, I screened it from the inside with some screen. And then we rather than me rebuilding it. Up in there on me. Okay.
We're back.
I'll say you froze up there a little bit.
So anyway, that was another fun one. It was interesting. Every one that you do is always a little different, but it can help you understand how bees do stuff out in the wild and where they put stuff, where they put all these different resources inside there and how they do it. That can help us. Again, for me, I feel like it's helped me to become a better beekeeper and know where I need to keep stuff placed within the hive and not to manipulate things in a certain way. But yeah, that was a cool house.
I was in Webster Groves.
That was in Webster
There's a lot of
Groves, yeah.
old big houses in Webster Groves.
Yeah, really nice neighborhood. It was an older lady that lived there that she was, I think it went to a senior home, but they were
getting ready to sell the house. So
Yeah.
they needed the bees removed.
needed them gone. We
She
made
didn't mind them there, but they were selling the house, so they needed to go.
As far as the other cutouts y'all do, say you going into sheetrock and everything, do y'all repair all the sheetrock, float everything back out and paint, or y'all just kind of close it back up and they
So
actually come in?
I'll close it back up. If I end up breaking the drywall as I pull it out, which I don't know, 50% of the time, sometimes it'll crack. So I'll have to scrap it and go get some more sheetrock. I'll usually replace it and get it all prepped. And then all they have to do is bring somebody in to mud, tape, and paint it. I worked as a carpenter for a number of years building houses. And the one thing that I probably can say despise.
There's 2 things you don't like: roofing.
Oh yeah. Roofing, won't do it. I will pay somebody every time. I despise roofing, but the second thing that I despise the most, and this is really kind of an artwork or an art form, is mudding and taping.
Mhm.
Not that I can't do it, because I have done it before. I've done it in like some basements that I finished. I've done some smaller jobs, but
We have a tape joint in our vault that's been popped for years,
No, I fixed it a couple times, but and then I paid somebody to fix it.
I've done plenty of sheetrock work. That's what my dad done for a living. So I grew up in summer times off of school, go to work with him, make a little extra money. And hanging it, floating it, orange peel, acoustic.
Mm-mm.
I hated it.
Yeah. Luckily what I did is so another gal that we are is on the board with us, her husband actually does a lot of
Handyman work.
handyman type work. And they said, you mentioned something to one customer, and I tell them everything is up front as far as what's going to happen, how it's going to go,
Payment
what
schedule.
I see, payment schedule, everything is nailed out ahead of time. I don't want any surprises for the customer. That's the last thing that I want, is them to be surprised about something. So we hash everything out. Double dot the I's, couple cross the T's, make sure that everybody understands what's going to happen. But one thing is, I always tell them, I'm like, you're going to have to find somebody to do this aspect of it. And usually if it's vinyl siding, I'll repair everything, button up from the outside. I just hate sheetrock, mud and tape, and I don't like doing it. But I was able to get her husband. The customer said, hey, you mentioned something about somebody, because I thought he had somebody lined up. And I said, yeah, I said, I'd be happy to get you his card. And he went out there today, I think, to either bid it or to do it. So, and I said, hey, I might have another one for you if you're interested.
Hey, it's the Raccoon Whisperer.
Yeah. It's our buddy with the
I
cat.
just came in. I've been baiting them dudes up for another go around. 9 down, about 45 to go, I think.
Man.
The one thing I was wondering when I seen those, why do all your cats have masks on?
Well, yeah. You city boys, that's probably about how smart you are.
Hey, you can't trust guys like me. They go out there with those wake boats and disturb all you guys fishing. Just no good for nothing.
I got you, buddy.
The coon hunter.
I'm gonna start calling you wakeboard Melissa and tubing Tommy.
So you got that backwards though, because I've never been on the wakeboard, but I did go tubing this weekend for like the first time, and I can't even tell you how long.
Mm-hmm. She did. She got out there.
I'll tell you, them little night bandits are driving me nuts. I got several cats. They're barn cats, at my farms. But they were going through 40 pounds of cat feed. The coons were eating about 40 pounds of cat feed every 2 or 3 days.
Wow.
I put it out, they'd eat the whole thing. And I'm changing the subject. We're not here to talk coons, but I had a metal garbage can with a metal roof, and I actually put a chain over the top of it. And them little suckers were smart enough.
Mm-hmm.
They forced that metal lid up. And I went out there the other morning. That was the final straw when I started trapping. And there's 2 of them come out of that metal garbage can, and they'd eat about a third of a 40-pound bag of cat food that I had in that metal garbage can. So that's when I started trapping. So I've actually trapped 2.5 nights, and I've caught 9 so far, and then 3 live traps.
Well, don't be dropping them off near my house, all right? You just keep them over there in your state.
Hell, I've got people ask me what I'm doing with them, and this is the truth. I've got some property in the river bottoms that joins one of the smaller rivers. And I'm taking them up there and turning them loose on
They'll be able to eat out there.
And there's not a house within 3 or 4 miles, but where I'm taking them to. So, but I'm trying to clean them up. But I've got a bunch of them. I'm still seeing them. So.
Is it just all of a sudden they're all there? Or?
No, it's been a couple years ago. I had a house cleaning. I trapped for 26 nights, and I caught 27 coon out of one building.
Wow.
On my main barns. That's when I had several cattle, and I had a show barn for my show bulls and stuff. And I caught 27 coons out there in 26 nights.
So your nectar flow still going up there?
Mine is pretty decent, Lee. I think I've got. You guys talked about the Dutch clover. which it's starting to dry up. They're not working as hard as they was. But I've got a lot of elderberry. I've got golden rain tree. I've got senior moment. I got one other that's I've got good flow on yet. It's starting to dry up some, Lee.
Do they get a bit of nectar off of that elderberry?
Yes.
Okay. I wasn't sure how much they got off because I mean we do have some of that blooming around here.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's a whole lot, but I mean we got a decent amount here.
It's more nectar, in my opinion. It's more of a nectar flow than it is a pollen flow. The elderberry is. So, well, we've got a lot of them in any fence rows and so forth. It's got a little fallow ground in them. Well, you get some elderberry in them, you know. So, I want to give an unsolicited comment on Rick Rorick's horizontal hives. The one that you helped me load at Nobby, if you recall, Lee, you and Dawson. I put bees in it. I put a nuke in it this spring. And I was a little apprehensive about how to handle it because I'd never messed with them. But I went through the Entar box day before yesterday. It was an enjoyable experience. I didn't have any lifting, and I had to do some expanding. Added 6 more frames and added them into it. And I want to say to anybody that's interested in saving on their backs and having an enjoyable hive to work, that those are a nice product.
They're going pretty good for you then, huh?
Yeah, I enjoyed it and it worked out quite well. So that's unpaid, unsolicited, but that's Ricky's horizontal hives, especially for older people or handicapped people. I'd say I would highly recommend them.
I know I got a picture of your hive here somewhere. I just can't find it at the moment. I was trying to find that so I could pull it up.
Mm-hmm. It's my Semper Fi special.
Yep. But I don't know where I got it at.
And I really like it. And I really enjoy it. And my bees actually it's kind of a small package in there in it was late March. And then actually right now I've got 29 frames pretty well full of bees in that thing.
I was hoping I could find it here, but
so you checked ours last with the glass, the mason jars.
Mhm.
Were they building comb in those mason jars?
Starting to. Yeah, Ricky made us the undercovers on top for our horizontal hives.
Yeah, I've seen those.
Yeah, we showed you. It has the little glass mason jar, pint jar flipped upside down. And Melissa sold a dozen or 15 of them last year. And he, on that horizontal he made for us this year, which actually didn't go out yet because I haven't finished the prep area. But the 2 that we have out there currently, we have those on. And they were starting to draw comb inside those, I don't know, week and a half ago. So hopefully they continue to do that and store nectar in it because those were pretty hot sellers. People liked them. Brian C. asked about sumac. I'm guessing he probably is asking if they get a nectar off there. And yes, the answer is they do.
Yeah, that's one of the other things I was starting to think of with sumac. It's coming on pretty strong. And milkweed.
Yeah.
How good a honeybee. They work it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Some people say they're hard on honeybees, that they get tangled in it and etc. I don't know, don't keep track, but we've got any roadside ditches or anything fallow. There's a lot of milkweed growing in the area right now, so that's probably the main source. I'm not saying we still got a strong flow, but we still got some flow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we
And
haven't
all
been.
my hives are packed with nectar. I mean, you know, what isn't capped, I've got, I don't know how, I haven't pulled any yet, but I'm going to start probably the end of next week. I'm going to start pulling a super or two and checking them and see where we're at on the honey flow or on the honey.
Mm-hmm.
Look like we got Ricky in the comments here.
Mhm.
We should have him on as a special guest sometime, Lee.
Yeah, we might have to schedule something with him.
Hot.
It's muy caliente.
Yeah.
You got to remember, he don't know how to speak that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to go because we weren't in our hives really this week at all. So we'll have to early next week go check and see if we need to possibly put more supers on or if they're just kind of stalling out or not.
Yeah. My guess is I think they're probably going to start to stall out here. So if I don't see much coming in before too long, if I have any
We'll just fall.
supers that were mostly empty, I'm gonna pull those off and shrink them back down just a little bit. Honeybee Compound asks via what time of day do they work sumac? And I cannot answer that question because I honestly don't know.
It's usually earlier in the day. Seems to me like, you know, in my area. I'd say earlier morning. I'm going to say in the morning rather than in the afternoon. You won't see many bees around them in the afternoon. You guys were talking about keeping track of a bloom or flow or what trees. I do, and I have, and it's running pretty close to just about what it always has been every year, for starting with a dandelion, the red maple, and coming right on through, just about as normal.
Mm-hmm.
This is pretty much the end of our
Yeah.
whether that be. Well, we're going to have a few wallflower yet, and I've got some clover and some around my area that's producing pretty good yet.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that kind of makes sense what you're saying if it's in the morning, because I'm not saying that there's not, but I'm not aware that a lot of plants produce nectar when you're well up into the 90-degree mark, you know, and above. I don't know. And I could be wrong about that, but of the plant species that I am familiar with, they don't produce nectar when they get back. They actually draw nectar back to conserve on the plant itself. You know, it's kind of a survival thing. They'll push out nectar, you know, when they're doing really well, the temperatures are optimal, the moisture content's optimal. But if anything's not right with the plant, it'll shrink back and it'll draw back.
I think I agree with that. And, you know, not that I'm an expert on plant pathology, but I agree with, you know, what you're saying there.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing when you get to turf grass. Everyone's like, oh, you know, talk about, you know, when it starts to get really hot, and like, my grass is dying. Well, your grass is not dying. It's going dormant. It's shrinking back. It's grass is 70% moisture, which means 30% fibers. So if there's no moisture in the ground, it can shrink back quite a bit, you know? So it's just all the plants do the same thing, right? So that kind of makes sense what you're saying, JW. I would tend to agree with that based upon the knowledge I have as a general statement.
Well, I'm just talking about farmer experience. I'm not talking about any scientific testing. I'm just telling you, you know, what over the years of the knowledge that I haven't forgot, that I kind of accumulated. If I haven't forgot it yet.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at it, a lot of your plants are I would say, produce more nectar early in the day versus later, because as it's warming up throughout the day, some of that nectar is going to evaporate. Some of it is just going to soak into the plant itself and to hold the nutrients that it needs. And then overnight, temperatures cool down, everything can open up, and it'll start pushing nectar back out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have to say, I think we're definitely have some sort of flow going on where we are, because with doing the removals the last 2 days, we didn't have any robber bees trying to come and get on the comb and get into the honey and all that. So, you know, that's a sure sign that there's something flowing, when you're not having bees trying to just swoop in and clean everything up.
The only thing I'll say,
excuse me,
just you know, when it comes to area specific, the area that we removed both of these colonies at are very well manicured neighborhoods. in the suburbs of the St. Louis city. So having said that, there is a very diverse floral, the amount of floral plants that are out there that are constantly blooming this time of year. Because I see them pollen coming in, and I don't mean that where I'm at, maybe out toward the edge of the county, where you might be getting toward a little bit more agriculture. That doesn't mean it's something flowing out here. People keep their yards watered, their plant beds watered out in that area, so they might have something trickling in, constantly. So that might have been why we're seeing much of that out there.
Well, I've also got a lot of honeysuckle, but bees don't work honeysuckle, in my opinion, that hard. I've got a lot of bush honeysuckle and vine honeysuckle that's somewhat natural and in my area, but I don't notice that the bees work.
I've never really seen them work it myself. Now, I've heard some people say that like bumblebees and all will
They
work.
do. You'll see.
And then sometimes they'll tear a hole in the side of it,
Mhm.
and then the honeybee can reach in.
Yeah, that's true. You'll see a lot of bumblebees. Even on my wife's into flowers quite a bit. She's got a lot of petunias and stuff in her flower gardens and so forth. And you see the bumblebees really work those petunias. And she's got a bunch of them, but you don't see honeybees.
As far as bumblebees, I don't really think I've ever seen them around here. Now, we get some of the carpenter bees every now and then,
Yeah.
but I've never heard of anybody in the area having a bumblebee nest or anything like that down here.
Yeah. Well, we lived in Florida for a few years, and I to be honest with you, I don't recall ever seeing them down there. But I had mo bunches of carpenter bees. They like to eat a couple of my wood sheds up, that I had for storage down there. So, but I didn't intend to come on tonight, and I just I felt the need to give Ricky a little hey you on his horizontal, because I'd never worked it. I was a little apprehensive. Tom will verify. I called him on a couple of things, to ask him if he'd worked any of his, and I didn't really know how to approach it, but it was actually quite simple.
Mhm. I've got one colony in my horizontal right now, and I think they're up to like 13, maybe 14 frames. And that was the swarm that I had caught from work.
Yeah.
And they started out with 3 frames in there, and they've built up pretty good.
Shane brings up a good comment here. He said he believes flowers start to produce nectar when it hits 61 degrees Fahrenheit. Depends on the flower. Not sure the top end or when they stop. I think this is very dependent upon a lot of things that sometimes we don't think about. So if, where JW is at, maybe 100 and something miles away from me there in Illinois, and north to south, him and I are probably pretty close to the same. But his soil conditions might be better than what my soil conditions are here. So I can tell you that I know for a fact.
I think it's freezing again.
Oh,
There he is.
I'm back.
You pay your light bill?
When I've done certain plantings, plants will perform better or worse depending on the soil composition. So if JW has a better soil composition where this white Dutch clover is growing, and he has a similar moisture content, his bees may still be working that where mine are not. So, somebody pointed out the other day that was actually I never really thought about, and this was here in Missouri, and this is from a seasoned beekeeper. He said, don't always count on the white honey clover or the yellow that you see growing right along the roadsides to produce nectar. And he said the soil, and I never thought about it, the soil conditions along the road easements are poor. If you look at it, it's mostly rock with a very, very thin layer, at least in our area, a thin layer of clay and dirt, which is not going to offer a lot of nutrients to it. So even though that plant might go ahead and be able to survive and even push out a flower, that doesn't mean it's producing out a lot of nectar either. Whereas out in a field out there where JW is at, where he's probably got a better soil, that may be producing a lot of nectar. So that's something to think about as well too. Just because your bees aren't working it doesn't mean that they don't work the plant. Maybe where that plant is at, it's just a poor soil condition or maybe it dries out faster and it doesn't have as much moisture content in the soil because of being poor. So that's, I think, something that we should, worth pointing out too.
Trying to make Tom's head big. Tell him he's making good points.
I didn't see that. Where's he at?
Right there.
Don't give him too much credit.
There's always some nonsense coming out of his mouth. I know that.
I'm just spewing a bunch of nonsense, Randy. I'm just I'm just being confident, so I'm selling it. Isn't that how we do it?
Don't give him very much confidence or brag on him up there. Melissa does everything up here. I'm telling you.
He's gonna have to get a bigger hat before long, huh?
Yeah.
The head gonna swell up.
Yeah.
All that's making me gray. JW, look at that. Hey.
Well.
Telling you, man. Yeah. I don't know.
You don't know what gray is. You're just a baby.
I'm pretty excited though, Lee, when we're going down to Louisiana here, in September. JW said he's bringing his fishing boat down there. And I told him I was going to bring my skis. And he said, don't you dare. He ain't pulling me behind his boat in those skis, is what he said.
I don't want to ruin my reputation, but doing something like that. I
was about to say, Mr. JW, you might be able to have a little bit of fun with that. You can swing up to the land real fast and cut back out and see if he can hold on.
Mine's a real fishing boat. I don't have a big motor on it.
My
it's
question is,
so I can't throw much of a wake up there for his little wakeboard activities and all that stuff. So.
My question though is, JW, how do you put a hitch on the back of your airplane to fly the boat down?
Yeah.
Well, if he buys the bigger airplane, we can just shove it in the back.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you can get a Chinook helicopter. We can tow it with that.
Yeah, you're gonna have these people think I'm a multi-gillionaire or something.
Multi-gillionaire.
Do you need another grandson, JW?
I got about all I can afford now. No, I got pretty good offspring. I don't have many complaints, but my youngest grandson is about the age of your boys. Well, he's a sophomore in college, is my youngest one. I've got one granddaughter she'll be a senior in high school. She's my baby, so.
They grow up too quick.
Yeah, they do. That's for sure.
But my boys are older than you guys, I think. I've got 3 grown sons. They're all in their 50s, so.
Older than me.
Mm-hmm.
Not much,
but a little bit. I thought you were only like 50 years old, JW.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. Tom kind of made me feel old today. He gonna text me, Mr. Lee.
Yeah.
Tom older than I am.
Yeah. No, actually, I thought you were older than me by like a year.
I think you're what, 47, 48?
I'm 48.
I'm 45.
I think I'm 48.
I'll be 46 in September.
I thought you were one. I don't know why. I knew we were close to the same age. I thought you were 1 year older than me or something.
I know why. It's that old age he's starting to forget.
Yep. Telling you.
I don't know. I might have to play the old one tonight though, because it's after 9.
Yeah.
Okay. About ready to call tonight.
Yeah, I got to get up like 3:30 in the morning. So
that's gonna come early.
I still got to get a shower and eat too.
Yeah.
But I appreciate everybody coming in, and I know Ricky does too, since we done this on his channel. And like Tom said, one of these days we'll get Ricky on here as a special guest. If we can get him back to America.
That's right. Hopefully he didn't take any of that.
Yeah, he didn't try to smuggle those.
He didn't try to smuggle those queens down there. I mean, I'd help a friend out, but I don't know. I don't know if I'd do well inside a Mexican prison. I don't keep much of a tan. I mean, I'm pretty. I don't know if I'd fare that well.
Yeah, they call you loco gringo.
That's exactly what they'd say. Yep. That's it.
But I appreciate everybody coming in, and hopefully, I don't know if Ricky's going to be back next week or is it the week after he's going to be
Well,
back.
he said 3 weeks,
Yeah,
so
I thought it was
next
the
week
week
will be
after.
3 weeks, so probably the week after. But
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, we'll
Think
see
it's-
what happens with our schedules next week if we're able to do everything. Because I know last week Tom said if we were going to do a live, they'd have to do it on the road. They
Yeah.
were driving.
live from Taylor Rock Lake.
Mhm. I think we're home next weekend, actually. So
Yeah, we'll be home next weekend.
Yeah.
Next week.
Sounds good. All right. I hope everybody has a good night, and we'll catch y'all on the next one.
Good night,
Night,
y'all.
see ya.